All
Hi
right.
all.
Cool. Yeah. So I don't know. I remember you had some thoughts about games and when should games feel like when should you discard a project, I guess. That's a question. How about you? When do you decide to give up on a project because it's not working out? Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Um,
Oh, good.
yeah, I can. I think I know early on. Um, I've discarded. I've put aside projects because I don't have the time to work on them and polish them enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I really know very early on, but that being said, I haven't tried any strategy or tactics or what have you, like
Mm-hmm.
deep games.
Sure.
Um, but on the other hand, I used to be so bad at even like basic arcade fun. I used to be so bad at like
Hmm.
knowing what fun is, and I've read I've read all the books. I've read um, the books that say what makes games fun,
Mm-hmm.
like a theory of fun in game design and everything.
Yeah.
I Nothing used to click. Like it didn't click. It
Hmm.
started clicking when I started making games like en masse, like a lot of games, and not even studying games, like just making them,
Yeah.
just trying to put my vision out there.
Well, that's what they
So
say you
now
have to
I'm
do is
like,
just like fail 100 times, right? And then you start to like get it.
yeah, that's an understatement for me. I failed so many times. Like now I'm basically in love with become.
I think you were about to say you're in love with Pico 8, but then you cut out. Uh-oh. Yeah, I think that Cast Pixel, your connection's really unstable.
Uh,
Um,
is it again?
yeah, I keep
No.
losing you. We're almost out of time, but can you post some links and stuff into the chat? And if you have any more thoughts, maybe type them out, or you can give it one more shot.
Sure.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
about that.
I don't have anything to link to. Like, just check out my Twitter, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, I love your work. I love your podcast. Be super well. Thanks for having me.
of course. Thank you so much, and I hope we get a chance to work together at some point again someday.
Sure thing.
Alrighty, I'll talk to you soon. That's Cast Pixel, everybody. Thank you for joining us through that. Sorry about the technical issues. I think we should be better now. I reduced my stream quality a little bit. We're not going to need the super HD for what we're doing today. So next up on the program, we're going to have Dan C. of Triple Town. And of Spry Fox, I should say. Well, most well known for Triple Town, but many other great games as well. Alpha Bear actually is another new one. Spry Fox. Let's look up Spry Fox. Cozy Grove is the new one. I love the art for that. Yeah, so we'll talk to Dan. If you guys have any questions that you want to preload into the chat about Dan, let me know. Steambirds, yeah, that just had the MMO version. I think went live like last year. Dan's presentation on the game of platform power is probably the work of his that's most helped me the most. Game of platform power, is that what it's called? I must have seen this. So this actually, Lost Garden is this blog. I should just say, this is Dan's blog. He doesn't really write for it anymore, as far as I know. Although I haven't checked in a while. Oh yeah, Project Horseshoe. We hung out there at Project Horseshoe 2018, I want to say. But yeah, I guess so. He still posts a little bit. But Lost Garden used to be like he would post all the time. And it was actually, it's funny. I remember David Serlin telling me that he got into writing about game design because of Lost Garden, and he was like, I want to like make a blog that's like better than Dan C's blog, and I was like, I felt the same way. He was a major inspiration. I think a whole generation, and by generation I mean like 5 or 6 people of game design writers were very inspired by Dan C's stuff. Would love to get some more Lost Garden articles. Absolutely. Cast Pixel, fun fact, Heath Burgun, Dancy gave me one of my first game dev jobs. I did not know that. That's very cool. Love to get more articles in general. Yeah, it's true. I would love to write more articles. But you know, I have this sense that nobody reads articles anymore. I mean, like some of y'all in the chat do, but that's it. I don't. I just generally don't get this impression that, you know, many people read articles. Like we right now we have 20 people in the chat, and I feel like that's about how many people would actually read it if I wrote an article. Whereas videos are a lot more impactful, but they also take way more time to make. I don't know. I tend to think of my game design writing or game design career as like maybe kind of going through phases. Somewhere I will focus more on articles and theory and writing books and doing videos and all that. And then sometimes where it's like, okay, like sometimes a game is the article. You know what I mean? Like the best article the most convincing argument I could make is a game. And so right now I'm in the make a game phase. You know, it was only 2015 or so that I started really learning how to program, learning how to use Unity and being able to build my own games all by myself. And so for these last few years, Escape the Omnocranom, Chess Mix, some other stuff have really just been me learning to program. And now I'm at a place where I feel like I really can do it. And so I feel like Gem Wizards Tactics is like my big like here's my like real serious full-bodied crack at, you know, actually envisioning the kind of game that I guess a lot of my theory is talking about. And so I feel like that's a good thing for me to apply most of my effort towards. After that, I might go back to doing some more articles and stuff. Not that I don't write articles now, but it's definitely slowed down since over the last year. So let's see if we can get Dan ready. Or wait, no, we don't have Dan until 3. Oh, okay. All right, so we actually have some we actually have some time. If anyone wants to call in, or if you have some questions or anything like that, please feel free. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to take another really quick break, and then I will be returning. And if someone wants to call in with like a 10-minute, something like that, you are more than welcome. I'll be right back. Okay. Ephemeration. You are more than welcome to call in. Okay, good. I'm glad you let me know who you are. Turning off BRB here. Bloop. All right. So we're gonna have a caller. Do you want to do video or voice? Hey, is this Robin?
Hey, yeah.
Hi there. Do you want to do video or just voice?
Video's okay with me, yeah.
Okay. Bloop, bloop, bloop.
Let's see. Turn on camera.
There we go. All right, so tell us, hello, tell us what, who you are, and give us your background and stuff.
Yeah, so my name's Robin, or Robinson Ferrer. I've been a solo dev for like 5 years, and I worked with Demiurge Studios, which was a mobile game subsidiary of Sega,
Okay.
for 3 years. So they actually just bought themselves back and are now making their own games again. Anyways, so right now I'm working on a game sort of as a hobby experiment to develop a programming language that you use to play an RTS with.
Nice.
So some of the inspiration for this was I like playing StarCraft, and found that there were aspects of the game that I really enjoyed engaging with. I really liked executing micro, but I found build orders kind of repetitive, and because there was no decision making there in micro, you get to make lots of moment-to-moment decisions every second. Where should this unit go, or whatever else was a satisfying problem to solve and to execute physically. I found that the physical feedback of my fingers really satisfying. So I thought about, what would it be like to automate the parts of the game that I didn't want to play, and I heard other people complain about micro, and you can write bots for micro, and so maybe it's like automate the parts you don't want to play and do the parts that you do want to play. And then I began to think about what an actual programming language would be like that you could use fast enough to execute in a real-time environment. So not just to write bots with, but to write more complex commands that would sort of more accurately reflect the intention of the player. So a grokkable example might be, move all injured units away from nearby enemy units.
Okay.
Like pull them back.
Sure.
And that's an action that you could execute, if you had unlimited time in this strategy game, or if it were turn-based or whatever else, you could pick out each of the injured units and pull them back. And in a real-time game, it's like how accurately can I make my intention reflected? And if you're only given the course selection boxes and a handful of different commands like in StarCraft, then your intention comes through with huge amounts of APM. So I started writing.
Let me stop you real quick. I just want to restate what you said just to kind of make sure I understand. So I'm thinking about Warcraft 3, which is the RTS I played more than anything else. And in that game, you often want to pull back your units so that they don't die and that sort of thing. And the micro is very there's fewer units, so the micro is a lot more specific and intentional. And so what you could do is you could just have some buttons on the bottom of the screen that are pull back units under 30% or something like that, health. Or you could have advance all units, or you could have group units together or spread units apart. And I think actually there are some RTS games that have something like that. I want to say Total War's combat system has stuff like that, right?
Formation specification
stuff,
and you can say maintain this formation. And so how much of that is user customizable, and then also runtime customizable. So I'm thinking about composable commands. So some of this inspiration came from the Vim text editor environment, where if you say navigate my cursor to the end of the line, you can use that to say cut all of the text from my current cursor to the end of the line. Uses the same input to do that move to the end of the line part of it. So things select all units with a stat that meets some ratio relative to the rest of the units would let you, select my highest DPS units, or select my most injured units, or select my fastest units, and so all of a sudden you get all of these different pieces that you can put together like a programming language, but hopefully fast enough to use them in real time.
So my question is now, let's say fast forward in time, let's say this project takes you a year, 2 years, however long it takes you to make, right? We fast forward to then. What is the actual product? Is it something that like I would like incorporate into Unity or something like that, like an add-on or a plugin, or like, or what is it, its own little system in which I make games, or like RPG Maker, or what is it exactly?
So I guess I'm starting with a game itself and the programming environment for writing commands in the game.
So like mods for this one game, kind of? Yeah.
And so you would write custom logic. You could write an AI opponent if you wanted to test that out, or you could write whatever you want on your command card. And then another actually, we'll talk about the command card later. But that's more of like the proving grounds for this. I think if the input method is actually feels good to use and is responsive enough and deep enough that feels like it's worth expanding on, then I want to try and extract that out and make that more accessible. But I'm not really sure what form that'll take. I think I've been looking into all sorts of programming language development and
Are you familiar with Kyle Kushtel and what he's doing with Cantata?
No.
Because he's making a turn-based. It's a turn-based game, but he's very much like valuing the idea of like extreme modability for his game, and that's like an interesting idea that that games sort of shipping games, like, it's very alien from what I do, because I'm like, no, I know exactly what you want. You want this, and this is what you're getting, and nothing else. But there is a totally different idea out there of like here's a game, but within it, it's extremely moddable, and it's like you don't even have to use weird modding tools or third-party tools or anything. Like within the system itself, it's super moddable, and I think that's great. It's a really awesome way for to facilitate game development. And all of us probably started I'm guessing you probably started your game development career using tools like Blizzard's
modding StarCraft.
Right, exactly. Yeah, same here. And so that kind of stuff is like crucially important, I think.
Yeah, actually, so along those lines, the game that I've built for it is right now as simple as I could conceive of, while still having meaningful interaction. So actually, I'll send a link to you. There's some 3 unit types. You have an attacker, a healer, and a reproducer. And it's of course grid based right now, and but I found that the systems that I set up for how many cells does a unit occupy, and what are its different attributes, and how do they change over time, and how do different abilities affect those attributes, was immediately, it was really alluring to add more complexity to the game, and I'm sort of holding off on that until I actually get the programming parts implemented.
Right.
Or rather, the interface around programming them, I think, is the biggest missing piece right now. So you can see some command line examples of just constructing a simple command. So actually, coming back to that part, a huge thing in the interface. So as you build up this command, I want a lot of really good feedback for what the current state of it is, and if I'm selecting units, you should see that reflected on the screen, and then what options to come next are really important. I think something that prevents people from programming is the difference between recognition and recollection, where if you have to have all of this in your working memory, it's easy to forget, like, oh, is this exactly how it gets used or whatever else. And autocomplete is a form of, with like IntelliSense and C# and things like that are, really advantageous, and I think have been a huge part of what makes Unity usable for so many people. But I kind of want to go even further and say, here's every function that returns a value of the appropriate type. So like, oh, you're trying to select a group of units now. Here's, you can select all of the enemies, you can select all of your allies, you can select by things on screen, you can select by command groups, and you can see all of those in your command card. So there are different tabs of the command card for each type. And so as you're inputting your command, the different type requirements will come up and it'll shift from one tab to the next. And I've also tried to include a lot of really reasonable defaults to make command input faster, because if it takes you 13 key presses to tell your units to do a thing, that's way too many. I think one of the baseline goals for me is about making the StarCraft level of input of select a group and attack this location to be the same in my game. So it's only additional depth and complexity for those compositions when you want to access it, but it doesn't require you to do more to do the very basics.
Right. So another way to put this is that you're freeing up a lot of human labor energy or thought or mind space out of having to do the very difficult, like tasks, but that require your attention, but that are rather obvious. Build orders being a very good example of that, but also a lot of micro being a good example of that. Like it's very obvious. I want to split my Marines up because there's banelings coming or whatever, so you're like sort of jettisoning all that mind load that people have to use, and then the question is like, well, what do we replace that with?
What's left? Yeah, for sure.
And that's, I think, where the process of like designing RTSs like almost like begins, right? So it's like you're laying the groundwork for. I've had this experience a lot with different genres where, because I feel like it's a very common thing of like, these games have like all this chaff, all this stuff that like really just should be automated. And then we find out when we delete that stuff, we're not left with very much.
It's possible this won't be fun.
Well, I mean, that's just generally been my experience when I boil down games in general. I haven't done this with RTS games, but in my experience is that when you boil things down, you're oftentimes left with very little. And so then you have to start doing a process of game design, which is good. I mean, like that's great. I think that's because like there's these conventions and sort of things that let people kind of just reproduce the same chaff that other games have, because like that's just how they imagine. That's what an RTS is. An RTS is you scramble around trying to click on each Marine to move it apart and building your build order over and over again. And so this is great because this would shake that up. This would be like, you don't have to do that if you don't want to.
Yeah, that's the dream outcome of this project. I think the first level of success that I'm looking for is, did I make a thing that feels good for me to interact with? Does typing out the commands feel good? And then it's, is this way of programming maybe something that could make programming more accessible to people? Right. And then the like pie in the sky dream is, I made a compelling game in this system and it affects how other people make games. But I think that's like, I'm not holding out for that. That would be very extra.
Well, anyway, this sounds super cool. Do you have a name for this project?
Working title is Brushlink, but that was back when I also wanted to do a whole bunch of paintball mechanics, like what's that Nintendo Squid game?
Splatoon.
Splatoon, right? So I was, I'm thinking about how to keep it abstract enough that it's not grounded in violence and war. And I think territory aspects, I really like Zerg creep and stuff. Putting a hack in the name is a good idea. I mean, so the working title is more just, what I'm calling it to myself, what the folder name is. But I'll try and make brush link a searchable term on my Twitter. I actually have my code up if anybody's a programmer and wants to like take a look at the language design. I think it's really interesting from that perspective. It's almost like a Lisp language without parentheses because it's typed. Sorry, I'm going on another tangent now, but because it's typed, the arguments get consumed greedily by the tokens that they're after. And what this does is it lets everybody, it lets you, you don't write any to disambiguate. If there's an optional argument that you're skipping, you can use white space on a new line. And I think it produces this incredibly legible command tree that, is just interesting from a programming language perspective also. So.
Well, that sounds cool, but I don't know enough about programming to say anything about that really. But if you post some of that on my Discord, we have a programming channel, and I'm sure a lot of people there would be interested to hear more about that. Can you give me some like links or anything that people can follow? Maybe just you on Twitter or anything?
Me on Twitter is a thing. I'll put that in the Twitch chat. And
good.
I have a personal website that's a bit of a portfolio. I'll put that in there too.
I wanted to say also another thing, that when you do put your thing out, I'm gonna make finally my RTS. I have an RTS idea called Age of Dipshits. And in Age of Dipshits, I have the sprite already for them. There's like these little guys that kind of go like this, and they have like googly eyes, and they're dipshits, And all the units are just dipshits, and it's an RTS, so it's very simple. It's a joke game basically, but the concept is that when you move a group, like one or two dipshits will start just moving in random directions away, and then you have to pull them back in, because like that's kind of the experience that I have playing RTS. It's like, where the fuck are you going? You like this little like grunt is like running into some random spot. And so you're just constantly having to fight against your own troops and pull them back into order. That's Age of Dipshits.
Yeah, when StarCraft 2 came out, felt like it was missing from the experience, where the unit pathfinding and the group pathfinding was too good, so everything would ball up. And whereas in StarCraft 1, sometimes like the shape of a Dragoon and how much space it took up changed during its animation. And so paths would like repeatedly open and close, and it would really glitch out the AI.
Yeah.
And so they just run in the opposite direction sometimes. So I remember making a map in StarCraft that had like as roundabout passages as possible, so that when you clicked move in this direction, the first thing that the unit did was run away from it as the crow flies, to try and sort of recreate some of that, like, how do I actually get over there feeling.
Right.
That sounds like an engaging point to make.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, the big issue was I would always create rally points. Warcraft 3 was nice because you have a hero, so you could just rally to your hero. But in StarCraft and StarCraft 2, there was no hero, so you would just kind of rally to like where you want to go, and then
the front of your base or whatever.
That would change. Like I would rally out to the battle, where I'm fighting, because I want to bring more Marines or whatever, and then like the battle be over, and this dipshit kills running up to get himself killed. I'm like, where the hell are you going, buddy? So they're also on move command when they come out of the rally, right? So if they get attacked, they'll ignore it. That's true.
So,
that's true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Robinson, thanks for joining me.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, do post some things in my programming channel, and look forward to seeing how this turns out and making Age of Dipshits in your game. In your game.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
All right, cool. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Very cool. So that was Robinson Ferrar. And soon we will have Dan C. Of Lost Garden / Spry Fox. And I'm interested to hear what he's working on, what he's doing. I'm also trying to be a little conscious of my voice, because I tend to, when I'm streaming, I tend to speak too loud. Because I get very excited, and because I like to enunciate. I feel like I want to be a good broadcaster. I don't want to be one of those people that's like You ever see that Onion video of the guy explains Bitcoin to you, and it's pretty good. Yeah, this guy. I'm always afraid of being this guy.
What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer digital currency. It's anonymous and decentralized. It's like being able to teleport money to anyone across the world. No, I think it's actually being teleported. It's a way of making millions of peers to track each and every Bitcoin on a public ledger called the blockchain. When you want to send someone a Bitcoin, you publicly announce that your account is sending a Bitcoin to the recipient's account.
I'm always afraid that I'm just going to do that. So I tend to I tend to be too loud, and then I lose my voice. And and I can already feel that I'm like kind of losing my voice. So I need to let others people speak and not yell. That's my challenge for the day. So let's see if we can, I'm gonna just ping Dan. Cool. Cryptocurrency is just so ripe for comedy. Voice level felt good. Okay, good. Well, yeah, no, it's not just, I do think it's actually quite good for the broadcast. It's just that after about an hour or two of talking loudly, especially for someone who, you know, on a typical day, I say almost no words to anyone. I'm just sitting and looking at a computer. Hooting and hollering about game design. Corey Martin, how are you doing? Good to see you. How is your game going? One with the really cool soundtrack and the really cool art. Leaping Lads, right? Can I look it up? I'm looking it up. What happens when I Google Leaping Lads? It's one of these for sure. I gave a 20-minute presentation on Monday and lost my voice. Yeah, no, it's you have to really be you have to have like you have to do it a lot. Or you have to know what you're doing in terms of it's like singing. You know, it's the same concept. You blow out your voice if you don't use it right. Hootin' and hollering. Anyways, Corey Martin's working on some cool stuff. Stay tuned for Leapin' Lads. Especially pandemic here, not touching anyone but the dog. Yeah, it's true. The game Leapin' Lads with music by the legendary Keith Burgun is going well. Awesome. I'm gonna do it this way. Probably something on your Twitter here. I love the art in this game. I think it's great. Does this have sound? Oh, it has sound. No music. You know, it's funny. I love my music I made for this game, but I also love how it feels without music. Very cool. Yeah, Leapin' Lads is cool. Very simple game, but very, very competently done. Oh, Dan is here. Okay. Theoretically, I've started a call with you. We got Dan. Dan C. All right, everybody. I'm about to introduce Dan Cook, who is from The Lost Garden. And our call is connecting theoretically, possibly. Okay, voice. Hello? I'm not hearing you. I'm seeing the green circle, but I'm not hearing you yet. Weird. Oh, it's perma green circle. I think there's something up with your mic on your end. So let's change our thing time. Boom. Cool. I'm not hearing you still. No. Chance it's on my end? I don't think so, because we just had a call moments ago and it was fine. And plus we do have that perma green circle thing. Shall we use a different thing, Dan? Do you want to try to use... Everyone for the technical difficulties, one moment. Do I have Skype? Let me check. Oh, I do. I hope I do. That might be. So I might have to... Ugh, is it going to install Skype? Gross. All right. Well, I'm going to have to install Skype. That's happening real quick. Yeah. Hopefully I can remember my Skype password. Google Meet. Google Meet would be, oh wow, look at this. It all logged in. All right, well we could do, oh, what the heck? Yeah, let's do Skype. There, sorry everybody. Almost done with the technical difficulties here. Cool. Oh, Skype is, of course. Hold on. I'll get you. Hello. It does work good, except I just have to fix my Skype settings real quick, but I do hear you. That's good news. One moment. Audio. Boom. Okay. Say some things?
Hello, hello, hello.
All right, yeah. And let me just make sure you're coming through on the thing here. Say one more thing.
Hello. Hello
Yay.
from Seattle.
Hello, Dan. It's good to hear from you. I haven't talked to you in probably a couple of years at this point.
Yeah, are you still in New York?
Yeah, actually, I just moved from like upstate-ish New York to Brooklyn right before the pandemic, because I decided earlier this year, I'm like, I'm gonna join like, you know, like a civilization and like live the city life and be all doing things all the time. That was back in like February. I moved in to the city, decided it was worth the extra rent expenses, and now I live exactly the same way that I lived when I was up in the woods.
I'm assuming the takeout is better though. It's
yes,
probably slightly better takeout food.
It is better takeout. That's true, which is good. So yeah, how are you doing? How have you been?
Been good. So also in the middle of the pandemic, so I'm stuck in a basically one-room apartment. The coffee shop downstairs is empty. So normally I would go down there in the afternoons and write and, you know, figure stuff out. And now I just go down there, I say hello to the barista, grab my coffee and go. So it's a little sad that way.
Mm-hmm.
we've been working on a new game, Cozy Grove, which is sort of an Animal Crossing like game, and we're kind of in the last stretch. So it's the land of 1,000 bugs. Hopefully not 1,000, closer to hundreds, but it's all triaging and prioritizing and figuring them out and knocking them out as quickly as possible.
When did you start on Cozy Grove?
Cozy Grove's been going about 1.5 years now, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So give us I've just been in a hole working on my own game, and I've only learned about Cozy Grove pretty recently. So give me the spiel. Like what's the concept? And I don't know, how did it start?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge fan of Animal Crossing, and they come out, but they come out only occasionally, and so I thought it'd be fun to do one of those. So Cozy Grove is basically, think of it as spooky Animal Crossing. You're a spirit scout, and you're on this camping trip where you're on an island by yourself. It's your overnight trip, and there you're supposed to find like a spirit or ghost or two and help them out, and then go back home. And you end up getting stuck there, and it ends up being a much more haunted location than you expected. And so there's all sorts of ghosts that you find and help out, and little imp spirits running around, and the island is sort of magical as well. So the forest will transform, and trees will spring up, and there's some nice animated moments in it. So kind of a spooky Animal Crossing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from a more systemic perspective, if I'm familiar with Animal Crossing, which I vaguely am, I wasn't before, but this year with the pandemic and everything, my girlfriend got really into the latest one. Neither of us had ever played one before that, really, and so I sort of know what it kind of is. So mechanically speaking, what's I guess what would we expect to see in this sort of that's different than Animal Crossing, I guess?
So one of the things that I really liked about Animal Crossing, and I've talked to a whole bunch of people about how they play Animal Crossing, and there's sort of roughly two distinct categories of player who play Animal Crossing. There's the people who like the sort of slow-paced reveal that happens for the first 3 to 5 weeks. It's sort of almost the campaign aspect of the game, where you're getting to know the place, you're getting to know the characters, you're discovering new things that you can do that you didn't know you can do. You're discovering secrets about how the world works, and then at about 3 to 5 weeks in, that sort of fades off, and you're now in the second stage, which is the longer term stage, which is I think of as social decorating. You're decorating, and you're kind of in this group that's found some friends that you can share things with, and then there's a smaller group that is sort of they're ritual perform, and they kind of do their
dailies,
social quite as much to perform their daily their daily rituals. And it's amazing what the fall off is between the people who are playing that initial campaign and the people who switch over to the social decorating. It's quite large. And so I'm definitely one of those people. I enjoy that sort of the narrative that's coming out, the slow reveal of new things. And so we really focused on that. So we have a lot more narrative in this game than you would expect in a game like Animal Crossing. There's more character stories. There's more of a reveal of, what is their backstory? Why are these ghosts sticking around? How can you help them? So which is new for us, right? We haven't done a lot of narrative games. The other thing was that we still have the decorating. Since it's a single player game, since we're not doing a multiplayer backend for this version, at least in the initial launch, The social decorating is that gets hamstrung a little bit. So that's not going to be as much of an option for people who are into that. They can still decorate, we'll have tons of decorations, but that's not so much of a thing. So we needed something to sort of support that long-term play. And another thing that is a huge for player motivations in something like Animal Crossing is this sort of collecting and building up your space. So systemically, we focused a bit more on that. We made it such that the decorations actually have some functional benefit. They they boost the happiness of various animals and plants and stuff around them. And so there's sort of a very light puzzle about what decorations and where do I put them in order to keep everyone satisfied.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. I was just watching. I was playing the trailer in the background here, and just blown away by the art. I mean, Animal Crossing looks great, but I think that this looks actually orders of magnitude better. I mean, part of it might just be my bias towards 2D art, but I have to say, just oh my god, it looks so good. This art style is just, and your guys' art always looks really good in all your games, but this is. I feel like this is your best. Were you involved in the visual design element of this game?
I did some initial art direction early on, but sort of a lot of the art style comes from an artist we found who lives in Spain, Noemi Gomez, and this is her first time working in games. This is her first time. She's done some illustration in the past. But this is her first time sort of tackling all the numerous challenges of game art. Yeah, she's just done a wonderful job, and she's working with a bunch of other very, very talented artists, and it's all just kind of come together. It's kind of fun. When the trailer was made, we didn't have a lot of the polish in, a lot of the special effects, a lot of the color grading, all that type of stuff that really makes things pop. And so it's just in the past month, as that stuff's been coming on, you have a good solid foundation of beautiful hand-drawn art, and then you start layering some of this polish on top, and it really is coming together.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, so I've been following your work for forever. I mean, since we were talking just before about Lost Garden and how so many designers and people who write about game design were inspired by Lost Garden to get into that. I don't know if I ever told you about that Serlin and I both talked about how we both wanted to make someday compete with you as having the best game design blog ever because of your work back. That was 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I haven't been writing quite as much these days. I try to get out a big Project Horseshoe report at least once a year these days.
I've been noticing that. Yeah.
Those tend to be a little beefier. They're not quite as digestible as the old the blog posts, but they're more deeply researched. So maybe there's a trade-off there.
Yeah. So I'm just I mean, if you want to talk more about Cozy Grove, I definitely want to talk about that more. But I also kind of want to talk about what I don't know, where. One of the games of yours that I played actually the most was Leap Day. It was called Leap Day? Yeah, Leap Day.
Leap Day. It was sort of a multiplayer Factorio style game. I guess, what do they call them now? Production games, factory games. It wasn't really a genre back then, and so we made it was our first. I think it was our first Unity game. And worked with a very, very wonderful programmer, Jason Coleman, on that one. And you had these little characters that we called them flan because they looked like little upside down flan, and they would walk along roads and harvest trees and deliver stuff to factories. And so it had a whole crafting system. The part that was really interesting about that one was it was multiplayer, but it was very asynchronous multiplayer. You had this central sort of crafting goal that you had to work towards, but everyone had like a piece of the map that was theirs. And you think, oh, maybe it's competitive, but no, it was actually very cooperative because you had resources that the other person did not. And in order to create some of the higher level crafting recipes, you had to trade those resources, which meant you had to build these interdependent networks, road networks between different players. The other really interesting thing about that one, which I don't think I've really seen done very much, is it was on a time loop. So it was on like I forget what it was. It was like 60 or 90-second time loop. So you had to do all your activities within that period of time, and then it would repeat itself. The day would start anew, and it was so there was an idle game component to it, where how can you build the most efficient loop within that 90 seconds, such that when the loop repeats for 24 hours straight, I accumulate the resources I need to build further.
Right. Yeah. So I played a lot of this. I just found it really weird and fascinating and interesting. And it struck me that, and so we've kind of had throughout the day today, we've been talking to a bunch of different people, and there's sort of been a little bit of a recurring conversational theme, which is sort of like, when do you know when a game is fun? When should a game start to be fun? Or when should you abandon a game, basically? And so Leap Day is a game that you guys didn't eventually end up like formally launching ever, right? Like you shelved it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we shelved it. Yes, yeah. It was so that game had a very, very long sort of like prototyping conception phase. Originally, it was an archaeology game. And then it just kept morphing because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. Jason knew what he was doing. I just didn't know what I was doing as a designer. And eventually we settled on this sort of the factory style play. And then it started really, really clicking. But even then we had doubts about it because a lot of people weren't used to that style of game. And they wanted something that was super, super easy to pick up and super, super easy to play. And as you know from playing that's a very thinky game.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of brain effort to like figure out like, oh wait, why is it doing that? Oh, and you're kind of debugging it.
Yeah.
So we thought like, even though people were playing it for hours upon hours, we were desperately trying to broaden the appeal of it. And I think the answer was that don't broaden the appeal. But at the time, we were making sort of mass market flash games and web games. So we were like, oh wait, our retention is horrible. So we need to fix that. So that one actually got killed by not did we find the fun, because we obviously found the fun. It got killed by metrics. It got killed by like you launch the thing, you get a whole bunch of people playing it, and then you look at your retention and you look at your monetization, and mostly we were looking at monetization, and it's like, oh, we can't make a business out of this, and because we can't make a business out of this, we have to kill the game. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another fascinating thing to me about.
So it depends. It depends on you can kill a game at many different stages.
Do I still have you? Sounds
get
like
back data that says that be sustainable.
I think I'm gonna restart our call real quick just because the audio started getting a little bit weird. So I'm gonna call you right back.
Okay.
All right. Bloop. Bloop. Hello.
How's this?
Much better. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's the other thing that's really interesting about your work is that you guys are like a real business. You guys like are actually looking at like metrics and trying to make sure that the amount you spend on making a game will be returned to you. and yet you are, I think everybody would agree, you're like a very visionary designer who tries weird things. And that's like, there's not a lot of people, I feel like, who do both of those things, but am I wrong about that? I don't know. Like, I feel like there's, it's like, it seems hard, and I guess this is what you do. It seems very hard to find that area where you can be sort of like this auteur, game designer for design's sake person, and also be running a business. And I mean, I guess theoretically I'm supposed to be doing both of those things, but I don't know that I necessarily really am. But yeah, so you're saying that you were talking about Leap Day and how it was just pure math, right? Like it was just looking at the metrics and being like, this is just not going to work for us. Somebody said in the comments, maybe it should have been less cute looking, and maybe that would have been a direction to go.
Yeah, we actually made an attempt. We actually have a version of the game. There's actually it had art and all sorts of stuff that was sort of like you are, taking over a planet with your invasionary robot force and sort of stripping it of resources, which is a dramatically less cute perspective on what it used to be. And we were going to release that on Steam, but then like money ran out at a certain point, and we had to move on to other stuff. So that was definitely one of the things that we were thinking about was like, trying to do a cute game in a free-to-play market was just 2 steps too far. So let's back off. Let's release on Steam. At that point, you could still release on Steam and get decent money. But we ran out of time, so we didn't get to execute that plan, which seems like a shame. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of this is timing, right? Like, if you hit the right game and the right idea at the right time with the right market, you can do amazing things. So for example, one of the games that we're relatively well known for is Triple Town, which sort of is I think of it as like, looking back on it, I think of it as sort of the founding sort of game in the whole merge genre that's kind of emerged out of that. That game would not be a success today. That game would be a dismal failure, right? There's no space for a low ARPU puzzle game, even if it's a super high retention original mechanic that like delights millions of people. There's just, the market would kill that almost instantly. And it really took about 10 years of people iterating on that design to figure out how to make money. And then they finally figured out how to make money, and now you've got something like Merge Dragons selling to Zynga for like $450 million.
Right.
But like if we had come out with that same design today, it just it would have been over. So a lot of trying to make a business out of original games is attempting to read the market,
right,
and then attempting to build something that's going to fit that market. And it's a hard problem, and it's honestly gotten a lot harder. We're in an era of maturing marketplaces. So new technology comes out, new opportunity for players to play comes out. Lots of tiny little studios, which we are one of, flood into that space. A few of them figure out how to like make small things that resonate, and because there's not a lot of competition, those small things go really far. Think of something like Doodle Jump, which is essentially a Flash mini game,
right,
which had hundreds of millions of players. But then as the market sort of like, as bigger money comes in, as successes start becoming established, people start figuring out the formulas. They start figuring out how to either capture distribution or lock down distribution. Audience gets locked down as well. Like people playing Clash of Clans aren't playing anything else, right? And once they play Clash of Clans, you've taken literally millions of super high value players out of the ecosystem for everybody else. And so you start to see a lot of consolidation. You start to see conservatism creep into the designs. So on mobile, for example, like if you're not a very specific, sort of highly refined variation on one or two genres, you're basically dead in the market. So that I mean, that's the stage we're in right now. Mobile has become much more mature. Steam has become dramatically more mature. Consoles are about the same maturity as they've always been for a while, but that's always been a hard market to break into.
I see what you're saying with the sort of like consolidation and this like calcification of certain like models, and at what point, what triggers that to loosen up? Is it just technology, or like rather the emergence of new platforms? And is that something we're ever gonna like see again, or like some part of me sort of feels like we're just gonna have this like Clash of Clans world, for another 10 years at this point.
So that's one of the fascinating things about media platforms is they don't go away in the way that people think that things go away. People always imagine that stuff ends with a bang, and that's not the case. Consoles were supposed to kill PC games, right? What happens? Now there's a console and a PC market. Mobile games are going to kill console. What happens? There's now a PC, a console, and a mobile market, right? So once you've got an audience, it's almost like a generational thing. Like once you've got an audience of like old farts who like playing console games or PC games, like that market is going to keep going along until those people die off. Like the Clash of Clans market, we've got that for probably, I don't know, at least another 20 years, right? At least a generation. I'm curious to see how exactly that evolves. That one's sensitive to the platforms, like if Google or Apple, because it's basically a two company market, right? If either one of those companies like change stuff up, then those could suffer. But yeah, those are going to be there for a while. In terms of new platforms, it's really random.
Right.
So, for example, we just released a game recently called Alpha Bear Hustle on Snapchat.
That's right. I mentioned
most people don't even know that you. Yeah,
I remember you mentioning that.
Most people don't even know that you can play games on Snapchat, right? And this is a game, and so you can release a game on one of these like strange platforms that has a lot of players. And not a lot of games, and you can get millions and millions of players on that platform.
How did that go, by the way?
So it was interesting. I can't talk too much about the numbers or anything, but it was a fascinating project because you basically are doing synchronous multiplayer with small groups of close friends, and that pretty much never happens outside of local multiplayer. So it's a very unique design space.
So yeah, like I did not even know Snapchat had games. I don't really use Snapchat, but I guess that's kind of the thing, is that we need to be not just looking out for like markets, but actually, or not just like, because what I would typically think of is like, okay, so I have like these kinds of games I want to make. Where is there some overlap between that circle and the circle of things that people actually seem to want to be playing right now? And then also on top of that, you have a third circle, which is like, what are some platforms where there hasn't been this huge influx of money and this sort of these design, all the players are eaten up by these 2 or 3 major game companies. Right, so there's like there's these 3 circles that you have to sort of navigate, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of those. I mean, we've made games for a lot of new platforms. Like we made a VR game, which I don't think anyone's heard of because I think about 200 people played it. And it was I love the design. It's one of my favorite designs I've ever done.
Which game?
It's It's called Beartopia. It was one of the games that got me started on this Animal Crossing kick. It's basically it was borrowed from Leap Day a little bit. It's a multiplayer Animal Crossing, but it's set in a daily time loop, just like Leap Day. And you've got little workers that you can tell what to do and how to harvest stuff. And you've got your main worker, who's sort of the builder. And you're on a little island with a bunch of other players, and you're all building stuff and organizing your workers to do things. But that was on Google's Daydream project, and Daydream is shut down now. Daydream doesn't exist anymore. So you can invest in these new platforms, and there's not a lot of people there, but there's not a lot of other developers there, but there's also not a lot of players there. So
or like security
that can bite you.
Yeah, especially if like, you want to make like, so my thing is like, I want to make a game that I can, update for 5-10 years or whatever into the future. And so for me, like, I really value the idea that I know this platform will be around, 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
And this is where cross-platform really comes into play. So I'm a huge believer in cross-platform. This is like this exact pattern to a certain degree happened to Don't Starve. Don't Starve, very, very successful game by Clay. I think the original version of it, there may have been some other stuff going on, but one of the original versions of it was basically for the Chrome Web Store. Which is something that a lot of people don't know.
Huh.
Chrome Web Store was essentially a new platform, right? There was a platform who was trying to like get games to it. They were giving out money to help developers put games on that platform. Now, one of the things that they did that was really, really smart is they made that a cross-platform game and obviously moved it to Steam and a whole bunch of other places. And so that initial like seed of the new platform was enough to like give them the resources to make a game that could then spread elsewhere.
Very cool. So Frank is in the chat. Do you want to bring him in and into the conversation and just talk about whatever happens here? Like have a random conversation with
Sure.
Frank?
Is this Frank Lantz?
Yeah. Please barge. I could use his. He can sort of co-host for me and ask you some questions. Because I need to preserve my voice. I've been going all day. I'm going to be going until the evening times, but I want to have more Dan excellent stuff here.
Yeah.
1 second. How do I do this? Because we're talking on Skype. Do I have Frank on Skype? I've got Frank on Skype. Pretty sure. We just add him, or if you have Frank on Skype, you can add him in. I don't know if you do.
I don't know if I have Frank on Skype. Me.
I have James on Skype. Oh, I do have him. Let's see. I'm adding you, Frank. Or I'm gonna try to. Yeah, Frank, just go on. What's it called? Go on Skype. We're Skyping today. This is Skype time. Let's see. How do I do this? Oops. Nope. Not that. Not that. Sorry, Dan. New chat. Group chat. 1 second, everybody. Figuring this out. Bloop and blop. Done. Yeah. And all. Nope. Not that. Right, more people. Oh, I added them to the conversation. All right, cool. I think this should work. Maybe. Hello, Frank.
Hello.
You want to go on video?
You decide.
Okay.
You're the ringmaster.
All right, let's do it.
I'll just do voice because Dan's just doing voice.
All right, fine. We'll do just voice then. Dan, you still there?
I'm still here.
Whoa!
Hello,
Hi, Dan. Hi.
We
Um,
were just talking about random things.
We are talking about
Oh,
random things.
enjoying it.
Frank, do you have any questions for Dan?
I do. How do you make money from video games, Dan? I'm going to go back to that topic.
I was going to ask that too.
I'm telling you, because you have it figured out. You put a lot of time and energy into thinking about those issues.
Oh, I'm hearing some echo, Dan. I don't know if you want to put on some headphones or something, maybe.
No, I've got headphones on.
Oh,
Let me double check that it's going through the right audio
Or
here.
maybe Frank, you got the stream on or something. I don't know.
Yeah, let me mute the stream. Hang on.
There you go. That'd be it.
Okay, I'm muting the stream. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, my question is just, Dan, you've thought a lot about this and have carved out a nice, healthy zone for making games and making money from games. I still find it baffling. You know, I can't tell you how often I'll be developing something and really have no clue. Should I bring this to a publisher? Should I just put it out there for free and try to build an audience and then magically figure out some way to make money from it? Should I, go to the App Store, and is it just freemium and or not? It's just, I still find it incredibly baffling. So I don't know how you guys think about this. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on the contemporary landscape for making games and making money.
So it's a lot uglier underneath than it looks from the outside. To be completely clear. Yeah, is everything going on? Like, I see you gesticulating, but I don't know if audio is coming through.
I hear you fine. Frank, can you hear Dan?
I can hear. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
All right, seems good.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like any company, like some days are skin of the teeth, and the deal comes through or the deal doesn't come through. It's not necessarily a sustainable business, making games. It's not the sort of thing that, if you want a steady job and a steady income, that's always a smart thing to approach. I'd start from that place first. And then the question is sort of like, how do we get by with the skin of our teeth? And a lot of it is excellent business development, to be quite honest. David Edery, my co-founder, he just has a wonderful network of folks that he talks to, and he keeps his ear out for opportunities. And then when the right opportunity comes along, we try to go for it.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me of being an advantage gamer, an advantage gambler. So there are people who make a living in Las Vegas. They make a living from slot machines. Now, slot machines are famously negative EV, but if you track all of the jackpots and you track all of the bonuses and you track the promotions that different casinos are offering, then you can turn that into a just slightly positive EV thing. So you're still gambling, but by doing the kind of by really understanding the landscape and the platforms and the deals and getting on Apple Arcade is an example of this, right? No one's making money on Apple Arcade except the people who Apple paid to make a game for Apple Arcade. It's lots of things like that. Is that how you guys see it as well?
For the most part, yeah. That's so there's income from games, and then there's income from deals, and then there is sort of cross-platform releases. Sort of the ideal situation, which happens only a certain percentage of the time, is there's a platform that's excited about something you're doing. They pay you some money to make it happen. Then you take that game and then you put it on other platforms when you can. There's exclusivity. There's a whole bunch of different requirements there that you have to navigate, such that you have a paid-for game that is somehow making some additional incremental income. And then you do that multiple times, and that's sort of the ideal situation. It honestly doesn't happen very often. Sometimes platform requirements are such that you can't easily go cross-platform.
Yeah.
Sometimes the platforms are antagonistic to each other in terms of business models. Like a mobile free-to-play game just doesn't work well on Steam, and so we're constantly trying to figure out like how to sort of make that Venn diagram of how the different platforms overlap and where the opportunities to get money and where we can sell it in the future. Make sure all those things align. But it's a constant dance. It's a constant sort of juggling act.
Dan, would you ever consider like Spry Fox making a hardcore game, like a?
They were just talking about that before with Leap Day, right?
Yeah. Is that something you guys have ever kicked around?
We did. We So we actually and this is sort of a self-discovery moment for us. So we made an MMO called Steambirds, which was a very hardcore shoot 'em up sort of game. I think like as a studio and as just how our culture is, we're not necessarily the right people to make that type of game. Like in order to make no one should do this, but if you were to make a competing MOBA, for example, you should have people who are deeply into MOBAs and they live and breathe it and they can talk about the nuance and they know why the timing of this particular feature at this particular moment with this particular animation is going to be 5% better than the thing that exists. And the types of things that we are into are softer. They're softer. They're like a huge percentage of players that play our games are women who are not interested in traditional hardcore games.
What about the Spry Fox team itself? What do you guys play? What are your?
It's all over. It's all over the place. Like we have a handful of people who play League of Legends. We have people who play. We have a lot of people who play Animal Crossing. We have a handful of people who play mobile games of various sorts. I mean, it's quite diverse. It's very diverse. But even if we had the individual players who are interested in it, that somehow has to intersect with this company culture, such that the way we communicate, the way we talk about things, the way we value things, results in a game that's good. And so, to a certain degree, it's fascinating how company culture filters what you can make as a company.
Are you guys board gamers over at Spry Fox? You guys, back when we were allowed to get in the same room and play games together, you guys do that?
We have some people who are board gamers. We have some people. There's probably a larger, I'd say, RPG contingent, which is a little less board game focused and a little more role-playing game, of various sorts. Story games, GM-less role-playing games are a big deal here.
Cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Dan, because Frank brought up the idea of pitching. I know that you don't work with publishers usually, right? Or do you?
So that's as I was saying, the market's maturing, so we've been doing a lot more pitching lately.
Okay.
And that's honestly been a skill that I've had to learn. Like if you looked at our early games, they were essentially unpitchable. We would say we're going to go into a hole for a while, prototype something, and we literally have no idea what the theme is going to be. But we're going to find some fun mechanics, and we're going to sort of turn that into a game eventually.
Right.
And pitch folks listening to pitches do not want to hear that.
Well, let me go on with that a little bit. What do they want to hear, I guess? And then I have a specific question for you with regards to this. Kyle Kushtel put together this chart of when, if ever, you should pitch your game that I wanted to get your response to. But what do they want to hear in a pitch? What have you learned? Give us some tips.
So they want to know that the team's excited about it. So like your personal excitement and your ability to sell the game is actually dramatically important in this situation. Like, are you convincing? So a lot of times, like the fundamental truth of pitching any game is someone's going to give somebody a lot of money, and it comes into a very human thing. Do they trust that person is going to turn their money into something good?
Into more money, really. Right.
into more money. And at a fundamental level, that's what a pitch is about.
Okay.
It's not about it's to a certain degree not about the game at all. It's about this relationship between someone giving you money and they trust you enough to make something good. And so like this is one of the reasons why these mature markets are really brutal for a lot of independent developers, because they're unknown, and so how can you trust? Now there's a lot of stuff that goes on top of that fundamental issue, though. Like there's a lot of like, requirements of what they're looking for and market fit and so on and so forth. And so there's a ton of stuff that makes it a little more rational than just like the gut check of do you trust them? But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So there are certain people who are extraordinarily charismatic. And you put this charismatic person in a room and people will sign their games.
Right.
So the other things that people are looking for is usually there's a portfolio of games they're trying to put together and a strategy that they're looking at the market. So to a certain degree, you want to ask them what they're looking for, which seems like an obvious first step, but a lot of people don't do it. If you say, I've got a game, please fund it. Well, like, what are they looking for? What are they interested in? Like, what types of things are they trying to do? And then you can kind of understand how your game fits with what they're funding. And that's an important step as well.
Now, you guys have also put out games without self-published games as well, right? And I want to know why should one ever do that, or should one always try to pitch their game? Or is sometimes it's just not even a worthwhile endeavor to even try pitching? You're better off with this game just doing it on your own. What do you think?
So it used to be that, and I think this conversation still happens, which is like, the publisher is going to bring all these marketing resources and expertise to the table, and that can happen if you find the right partner. Mm-hmm. But for a smaller developer, a lot of the reasons why you go seek external funding is mitigating downside risk. Like if the game fails, which a lot of games do, does this put you out of business? And so a lot of times you're looking for funding because you want to basically like say like, oh, my upside won't be as large because they're taking a percentage of the revenue, but at least I'll still be in business and be able to make games. Mm-hmm. So often like you're looking for like, is this a deal that if everything goes south, I'll still be around? And not everybody values that, right? There are certain studios that the studio is literally created for one game. And they don't care like if the studio goes away if that game fails. The other thing is like personal, like you want somebody else's money, like you don't want to put your money on the line because it might go away. Again, the key idea here is portfolios. Like larger publishers are basically funding a portfolio of games, so they get to spread the risk across multiple games. So it's actually less risky for them to take on an additional project versus an individual taking on an additional project and funding it themselves.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I follow. Yeah, because I wanted to. I don't know if you can see the stream right now, but. I wanted to get your take on this this chart that Kyle Kushtel, who's my next guest, put together. He's making a 2D tactics game with a heavy focus on like modability, and it's very much like along the lines of the kind of game I'm making. So I'm interested to see his opinion on this is a working guide to understanding when, if ever, you should pitch your game. And it's got two axes. Can you see this?
Is there a link someplace?
Yeah, I put it in the Twitch chat, but also if you're looking at the Twitch, you can see it. I can also send it to you on Discord. I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. Boom.
Clearly, I have too many windows open.
Huh. So yeah, Frank, can you see this as well?
Yeah, I need you to explain it to me though. What am I looking at here? I'm having a little trouble.
I know, I had trouble with it too.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, so what really helped me was to scroll down a lot and look at the what some of the he sort of buried the lead here a little bit, because if you go look at this one, I don't know if this link will work, but there's one that has the zone of dismay on either side, and those are the areas where you're not supposed to pitch your game, because the cost to like, this is basically like how long it takes to create a game. I'm realizing now that I'm not necessarily going to be able to explain this very well. But there's a pitching sweet spot is the concept. And I understand the basic premise of a chart like this, which is that there's certain kinds of games where like 2D tactics games, 3D tactics games, apparently MMOs, these games it takes so much time and energy to create them, and so much resources to create them, that by the time you could pitch it, it's like you've already made the game. And that's sort of how I'm making a 2D tactics game right now myself, and I sort of do feel that way. Like, once it's ready for me to pitch it, I could just launch it. You know what I mean?
Got it. So the sweet spot is games that are clearly going to work, or that have a positive signal early enough that you can get leverage from having an investor, having someone invest in them.
I think so, but I'm not sure if does that sort of map to your
What's wrong with
understanding?
why is there a zone of dismay on the left?
Well, I think because adventure games, immersive experiences, those kinds of things require a certain amount of like content for them. It's all about it. They're kind of expensive in a different way. Maybe that I'm not so sure.
Got it.
I'm gonna have Kyle on soon.
Got it. Low systemic complexity means high asset requirements.
Yeah, total cost. Heavy art, complex systems. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is so. When you're pitching something, people are a lot of times looking at like market opportunity and risk, right? Those are sort of two things, and a lot of times people will look at market opportunity in terms of player fantasy, in terms of existing mechanics that are proven that they know map onto things. For the most part, the error of I'm proving out these unique mechanics and then trying to get somebody to fund it, that's kind of over. Like, for the most part, like that world doesn't exist anymore. Like even if you make a game that is, I mean, so all right, so there's a couple of places where it does exist. The hyper casual space in mobile, like, make a game, put it through our AI analytics system, and we will determine what your potential future revenue will be, and then we will screw you out of all profit. So there are some weird niche ecosystems that do that. But for the most part, like, publishers who are funding stuff are looking like, what are your comparables? Are you a team that we think is going to be able to accomplish this? And does it fit into our portfolio? And if all those things sort of align, then the pitch might go through. Yeah.
But you're saying it has nothing to do with like having obviously like some kind of like novel gameplay concept or something like that. Like that's orthogonal to the whole question.
Right. So you've seen the discussion about hooks lately, right? And hooks are really about where it comes down to in terms of novelness. Really, it's not that you actually have a mechanical hook that is proven out and people can play it and see. It's more like, in a 30-second video, can you explain something that sounds like it would be a mechanical hook or a thematic hook or some sort of thing that excites players? And so the proving it out is it almost doesn't happen at that stage. That would happen maybe more during the green light. If you promise something during a pitch that's kind of crazy, like, we're gonna have, AI that reads your mind or something like that, right? Then people would flag that as a risk. But let's say they believe you, it fits into their portfolio, and there's examples of stuff that's similar that they can believe in. Then you might get to a future stage where, like, oh, it's a vertical slice, and now you need to prove out, hey, does your AI read people's minds? And then at that point, the project may die. So, it's a lot of the mechanical prototyping is being pushed into the vertical slice milestones, as opposed to necessarily at the pitch stage.
Where is this hook conversation? I haven't seen this. Where are people talking about hooks?
The hook conversation is, oh my God, this is where people ask me names and I have a horrible name.
I love
names.
hooks. I love talking about hooks.
This is a fellow up in Vancouver made the cool Rhythm Zelda game.
Ryan Clark.
Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, the Clark tank.
Yeah,
what's his name? Ryan Clark? Oh, Ryan Clark.
Yeah.
Clark. Yeah.
If you search for Ryan Clark and
Titans of Industry, Industries of Titan.
Hook. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ryan Clark thinks a lot about this stuff, and so it doesn't surprise me that he's talking about this. Yeah, it's really interesting with mechanics. I always tell my students that you can't ever pitch a game by describing the mechanics. Like, even people who love mechanics, even wonky game designer people, like, you gotta give them the thing where it's like, you can't describe, like, you can't ever. In my experience, it never works to verbally describe a mechanic and have that be the hook. It always has to be something more.
Yeah.
Do you think that has something to do with, we were talking earlier about, like, I guess, like, games literacy or game design literacy or, systemic literacy?
Maybe these things are related. Maybe they're related. It's like dancing about architecture or something. Like, you have to you have to feel the mechanics to know to know that you want them. Like, if I say, look, it's an auction, only you're bidding for the player on your left, right? Like maybe the three of us are intrigued by that.
Right.
But
Maybe
nobody else is.
Right.
But if I tell you, oh, it's a game where there are dragons, but the dragons are imaginary, but they can actually kill people, right? And so there are these little kids who are dreaming up these imaginary dragons, but then they kill people. Like that is a thing that, oh, okay, I would like to see how that works out. And then under the hood, there's going to be an auction where you bid for the player on your left. But like those two things, like one of them works as a hook, and the other one is the thing that's the actual hook that actually hooks the brain into wanting to do the thing over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan talks about the hook and the sinker. And the sinker is a little more long term, but a perspective that I've really found incredibly useful in this is this idea of player fantasies. In that, like what you just said about like dragons and imagining dragons, and let's call it Imagine Dragon, and that that kill people, like that is immediately evocative. I can imagine what that world is. I think we've all had vague fantasies in that sort of universe. And to a certain degree, you're sort of like creating an evocative entry into an existing universe of human dreams, human ideas, human things that excite people. In the pitch phase, one of the things that I find most useful is I'm saying, this is the player fantasy that I have that I'm going to describe to you. This is what I want the game to be about. It's going to be spooky Animal Crossing with little spirit scouts and glowing eyes. And then I ask people, what do you think happens in that? And if you've actually tapped into an authentic player fantasy, they'll be able to tell you. They'll be able to say like, oh, this is what happens here. And then there's a fireplace that talks to me. And then there's going to be these ghosts, and they're going to be scary, and they're going to chase me, and so on and so forth. And like they will literally describe the emotional gameplay beats that you somehow have to capture in your game.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do all of them, but like a player fantasy should be a generative seed that you give to a player, and then they expound upon it with great enthusiasm, even if they know absolutely nothing about your game. And if you have that starts to you start to have the the foundation of a pretty good pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say has changed for me over the years is I used to be very much in that kind of game designer space where, you know, I think of it as, okay, what our job is to make this great system that people are going to love, and oh wow, the website actually loaded, hey, yay, that people are going to really love a lot, and because of its, you know, emergent complexity and its depth and it's all these, you know, things which, you know, I think are real, and then we have to figure out some like gimmicky thing to like trick people into playing the thing that they would like anyway. And over the years, I've changed that to recognize that no, actually, even for me, even for everybody, like the theme and the fantasy and the mechanics are more interrelated, and it's you know we've all been aestheticized to find certain things fun, and that is very much that is all tied in with theme as much as it is with mechanics. So I've noticed that in my own games, and we were just talking about this recently about you know, making, and I'd like to get your take on this, Dan, but the idea of like you know, oh, you should make a game and when you first start it should just have no artwork, and it should just be like, you know, green circles and dots and abstract things, because, you know, obviously you don't want to waste any art on this game that may be bad and not go anywhere. And in my experience, it's like, I love that as an idea, but then in my experience, when I actually try to do that a lot of the times, I find that that fantasy element is actually like crucially important to the thing even sort of working. Even for me, as someone who is like, you know, at probably one end of this spectrum of, or maybe I'm not at the end of the spectrum as much as I sort of had thought of myself as, I'm not sure. But yeah, I'd like to, what do you think about that?
The problem with squares and circles is they have no affordances, right? Like, it's imagine a door that doesn't look like a door. It doesn't have a doorknob, and you're prototyping a door, and you say, look at this awesome door, and it is a blank square 3 feet up, and it's, you know, 2 by 2, and if they happen to rest their palm upon it, because it's a touch interface, it transforms into a door that they can travel through, right? You've basically just removed every sort of mental schema that they have for interacting with that object. So to some degree, theming is functional. So you basically need to theme stuff to a functional level such that people can activate those mental schema, recognize affordances, and play your game. And if you're not adding that level of theming to your game, then you basically are making unplayable prototypes. It's a bad, you've created a bad feedback system in your prototype from the very start.
Does this mean
that
we will never again see a game like Go or Bridge, like a deep competitive strategy game that is basically themeless, that has a huge impact on the world and a broad popularity?
No, I think we'll have those. I think those will still exist, but they'll be in the context of Go and chess and all those existing games that are a mental model for doing stuff. So, like, I mean, board games, abstract board games are a thing, but they're in a tradition of abstract board games. Even Go came from a tradition of rolling around knuckle bones, you know, that then were made into finer objects and then were made into, you know, so on and so forth. Like, it's not, none of this stuff came from nowhere. So I think you can make those games, but I think you have to be relatively careful to say, hey, how do we introduce players to them in some way that they'll say, oh, maybe I should give you my time and effort and value to try this out. New platforms, by the way, are a wonderful place for this. Like, you saw a lot of abstract games on early mobile because people were like, I've got nothing else, and there's a thing there. Oh, wait, I tap on stuff happens. I've got nothing pulling my time and attention away, and bored people who are isolated will deal with some of these challenges much better than saturated people who have tons of opportunity.
Yeah, I think one thing I just wanted to like push on a little bit more was because I agree with you about the affordances. I think that's definitely just true. However, I also think it applies to, okay, well, let's give our temporary art the correct affordances. So let's make our door look like a door. Let's make our little, swordsman look like a little swordsman. But it's all, it's all like MS Paint, very, very simple, like drawn in 2 seconds, no animations or anything like that. And I still think that there's something there, and I think that you're on it with the tradition, or which is what I'm thinking of as like the aestheticization of fun. Like certain things, like if we're thinking about a war game, we have Advance Wars and other games in that genre that operate a certain way, and we are tuned, like our brains are sort of like tuned to appreciate it in looking a certain way. And the same way that with abstract, tabletop abstract games, we're tuned to like a little piece that we move across the board and stuff like that. And so if you were to make some weird it's hard to come up with a good example with the abstract games because they're so simple, but my point with going back to like a war game is what I've been finding is that like you kind of need like a good amount of production value in order to communicate that, not the fantasy of the war game, but the fun as we've learned it in this tradition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right. Zach Gage has some lovely stuff about the sort of 2 ways of thinking. I'm simplifying grossly here, which is basically like, are we using rote patterns or are we doing more exploratory sort of learning? And the incredibly hard work it is to put people into that exploratory learning stage, because most people want to use their existing patterns of learned behavior. They've learned what a game is. They've learned what a war game is. They've learned that they like war games. And then if your game doesn't look like a war game or doesn't signal that they should be using those patterns that they've learned over probably hundreds or even thousands of hours, then they're like, wait, I don't get to use my existing knowledge. I am out of here. Right. And then they immediately jump out of that experience.
Well, that is something. Oh, sorry, go on, Frank.
Oh, I was just going to say about Advance Wars. Do you know what the release date of Advance Wars was? It was September. I don't. It was September 10th, 2001.
Whoa.
Do you remember what happened the day after? Yeah. I always just found that like this very strange, because Advance Wars, of course, is so beautiful, this little candy-colored fantasy of harmless war. And
harmless, but also like super hyper clear with like the red team versus the blue team on a big battlefield. That's a good point.
Classic symmetric warfare, right? Yeah, kind of like this. So anyway, I just always found that amazing.
Interesting.
I always thought it would be an older game. I guess not.
Well,
I unfortunately have to jump into my next call.
That's perfectly good. I also have to jump into my next call. Frank, you are welcome to join me for my next call if you want. You're more than welcome.
I would love to. I'll stick around for a little bit longer if you don't mind. Just be your sidekick.
Oh, awesome! That's perfect because
this was super fun. Take care.
All right, thanks, Dan. I'll see you.
Bye.
Awesome. I actually need to run really quick. 2 seconds. So Frank, you want to just like take over the show and talk about some random thing? What are you doing? What are you doing these days?
What am I doing these days?
Yeah.
I am playing a lot of Hearthstone Battlegrounds.
What?
I could talk about that.
Let's you could talk about Hearthstone Battlegrounds or what you're working on. If you're you just had a couple of games. Oh, talk also. I can't wait for your new card game, by the way. I don't know if you've been talking about that publicly, but I'm very pumped for that.
Yeah, it's kind of on the back burner, but I'm working on a bunch of things. I'm working on a card game which is called Overflow, which I've shown to you, which I'm excited about. It's kind of on the back burner, but that's a physical card game that I'm currently working on.
You're back.
And okay.
You keep going.
And then I am also working on I'm working on a Unity port for paperclips because we have universal paperclips in the App Store, but it's like a weird version of it that is kind of based on the JavaScript, the browser code that I wrote for the browser version, and it's not as stable and fast and energy efficient as we would like it to be. So, and that is something that I'm working on with you, Keith Burgun. So you know that. So you're helping us out on that project. We are. We have a board game which is which we kickstarted called Hey Robot, which I will happily promote because I'm trying to get people to give me reviews on Board Game Geek, because until you accumulate the a sufficient number of reviews, they won't show your rating on Board Game Geek. So I'm trying to get over that threshold. So please, if you have Hey Robot, if you like Hey Robot, go to Board Game Geek and give me a rating. If you haven't played Hey Robot, then I highly recommend that you buy our board game Hey Robot, which is a party game that you play with your smart speaker. So if you have a Google Home or an Alexa sitting around and you don't know what to do with it, this is a party game that you play with your Alexa. So you try to, it's words on cards, and you're trying to get Alexa to say the word. You ask her, you can't use the word in the question that you ask. And so it's like one of those games. And it's funny because of how bad Alexa is, or how difficult it is. It seems like such a simple thing to do, but it's actually really challenging. And then I'm also in the middle of starting a new game studio, which I haven't really officially announced yet, but we're in the process of spinning up a new studio that I'm really excited about. And what else? And then also we have a thing I can't say, but this is another game that James and Hillary and I came up with that is so good, which I don't know. We're just in the early stages of, but we're play testing it now. It's really good. It's going to be, it's a computer game. It's word based, but it's like a strategy. It's like a tactics word game.
Nice.
The word game with tactics. It's going to be great.
Awesome.
So
I'm pumped
there you
for
go.
that. Very cool. Very cool. There was something I wanted to ask you also before. Well, actually, we got to bring on Kyle Kushtel. Do you know about
Yes.
Cantata, Frank? Have you heard of this?
I know a little bit about it, but I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Okay, that's what we will do. Boom. Let me get him on the thing here. Frank, are you on Discord? You are.
I am
right?
on Discord.
Can I call you on Discord instead so that I can get a three-way chat going? Okay, cool. I'll see you there.
Okay, bye.
All right, so let's see here. I don't have Frank on. Annoying. Second here. I have you. You can also Skype. Okay, I could do it that way. We all need to, as a civilization, I think, move on from Skype. I will add you though, just because. We'll see whether you get me that or. Okay, we got that. All right, we'll do this then. We'll do Skype. Let's see here. I gotta make a groupie boy. Boop and boop. New chat. New group chat. Almost there. God, I have so many Skype contacts. Who are all these people? How could I possibly have talked to all these people? KY. Annoying. Dude, what the heck? Oh, here we go. Got it. Frank. Done. Creating the conversation. And call. Hello. Kyle, can you hear me? I'm hearing like a looping Discord, Skype noise.
Hello.
Hello. Kyle, can I hear you? I can't hear you yet.
Hello, test.
Ah, there we go. There we go.
Yes.
Hello, Kyle. It's good to have you on the show.
I can't hear. Hold on a second.
Oh, you can't hear me.
I see my speakers. Say something again.
Test.
Yes.
Yay,
It works.
success. So Kyle recently was on the podcast a couple episodes ago, I want to say, talking
That
about
was-
Cantata. And yeah, so I forget how we found each other exactly, but we're both in the, the 2D top-down squad
Advanced
war.
Wars was great. Camp. Why
Mhm.
isn't anyone doing new Advanced Wars?
Yeah. I mean, your game is way very, very complicated. It seems to me compared to Advance Wars. Well, I mean, mine is
I don't know if
too.
it's a compliment or not.
Well, no, it is. I think you're also. I'm just saying that your game is a lot more different from Advance Wars than
Yes.
than someone might expect. Because
Yeah.
it's very original. I think it's a very original game. Maybe let's put on a YouTube video. Video. What is all this? Oh, these are not of the
Oh,
game.
you're on my website. You can look at
Yeah.
my photography. You can look at my Mickey Blanco video.
I want to look at
Stories.
Cantata right now, so I can give people a
if you go
sense.
to the you can go to YouTube and just search for Cantata game, or Steam or whichever.
Okay. None of those are good.
Right there, the videos. So you had it. The last search you did was good.
I have it.
Supposed to- if you go
Skip.
back,
Great.
back
Back.
one more time. You had I saw the videos come up on your Google search. I'm watching your stream in the other window. There you go. Videos. Oh, nope. Oh, that works too.
This
Who's
works
doing
too.
art direction for this game, Keith? It's gorgeous.
Oh, for this, I didn't work on this game. Don't compliment me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, it is super cool. Oh, here we go. Progress video number 2, number 1.
Yeah, whichever. The number 3 is the one that's got probably the most gameplay if you just jump to halfway through.
Here we
I
go.
changed a lot of the UI stuff recently.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to this,
Yeah,
and then
but
we can go find the channel, and then we can find all the videos.
There you go.
Boom. There we go.
How big is the team on this, Kyle?
Yeah, so it's I think it's a Clockwork Game Design exclusive. We recently signed a publishing deal. I can't say with who yet though, so we're expanding a little bit. But for a
Nice.
long time, I was the only designer and programmer, and then I was working with a pixel artist to do the art and a different character artist to work on the character art. And right now we've gone through and we're about 7, 2 full-time and 4 to 5 part-time. I still do most of the coding and design, but I'm bringing on someone else to do more of the coding work, and I have someone else sort of like helping out with design. So, we're a small little studio.
It's great looking, and I love the overall art direction. The palette, especially.
Yeah, I agree. It's I haven't seen something like it before. It's fairly original color choices.
I think like especially when I was first sort of mood boarding the game, I was looking at a lot of sort of like probably had a lot of the same like mood board shots that like Cyberpunk 2077 is looking at, like a lot of sort of darker stuff, like little neon, and then I watched like Jenny Jousha's talk about Be Glitched and sort of making everything pink. And then I was like, oh, like why can't a strategy game like this be sort of bright? Why can't it be brighter colors? Why can't it be more exciting? Especially the character art too, like kind of make it stand out. And yeah, we sort of just went through that direction, and now it's like it's not weird in Cantata to have like a pink mountain, but it somehow doesn't feel dissonant, and it gives the game, a look to make it sort of stand out against a lot of other traditional strategy stuff.
So one thing that I run into sometimes when I'm trying to use like a limited palette look for a game, if it's a sufficiently complicated game, I find that I end up needing a lot of colors. Like,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like there's a reason that like League of Legends has like 1 billion colors on screen, and it's because they need them all to indicate all the many different things that are going on. So I wonder if you run into that at all, or if you have any like ideas or suggestions for that, or if that's more of something that your art team is worried about, or
It's one of these things where it works in different scenarios. Like we have a general palette for each faction. So there's 3 factions in the games: the machines, the humans, and the aliens, roughly. And each faction has its own working palette of about maybe like 5 to 6 colors that are all sort of the same scheme. So you can see here in the video, the machine faction is sort of more blue-ish. And so we'll use colors from them. And then, when you put all the units in a line, everything sort of is very obviously its faction. But once you throw it against the actual map, it starts to get weirder. So there's some stuff I'm doing now with like highlighting. You can actually see it in the video. Like when you're highlighting units, things turn green or white depending on their highlighted status. Because I think ultimately working in a 2D context, especially in something that's isometric, having stuff stand out against the background is like, it was like an issue in, Civilization 3. Cantata doesn't really fix it, but ideally we give players ways to access units that don't directly always rely on like needing to click them on the map. So you can like tab cycle through stuff. There's like a paradox style outliner we're working on. So, it should look like a really nice pixel art scene, and you can click it to interact with it for sure. But we're not only relying on you to have to differentiate between units and trees, though we obviously want that to be where possible.
So now one of the most original things in this game is that when you unlike Advance Wars and more like StarCraft or something, you actually have like a base building component of this game. And what was most impressive to me is that you have this supply line, this like interconnectivity thing between your buildings, and so what that does is it makes it that the buildings are not just these atomized little units, but actually that you are building like this kind of like this, your base is like a machine that is sort of interconnected with the larger battlefield, right? So talk to us about this basic premise for the game, and like how does this work and what's the deal?
Yes, you can actually sort of see it right now in the video. So the general idea is that there's a few things like, so Cantata sort of sits in this weird space that I hope will be, lucrative. I do want this game to make money. I'm really trying to position it as something that can fund a studio. It's part of the reason I was pursuing a publisher. So part of it was saying like, what are things that I can take from games like 4X and Grand Strategy, but also sort of mix it with smaller scale tactical games like, Wargroove or Into the Breach, and sort of try to find a new model for what something between these two games looks like. And so one of the aspects of it is trying to say like, okay, well, can we actually add in sort of a proper capital S strategy layer to a tactics game in a way that doesn't just push a tactics game to be more of a puzzle, which I know is sort of a beat that you don't ever stop beating.
So yeah, I hate puzzles.
So,
down with that.
Yeah. So for Cantata, like part of the idea was like, well, we want maps to be big, which I also know that you don't like, but I want to have really big maps.
I prefer too big to too small. I'll say that.
So I was like, and Cantata is not just a reaction to Keith Burgun's design philosophy, to be clear.
Keith likes big maps. He just doesn't want the player to be able to see them.
That's also true. Okay. Also true. Yeah. But you got that going. You're good.
But so part of the idea was like, okay, well, we want to have big maps. We want people to do stuff on the map, and want people to feel like they're sort of establishing a base and kind of crawling across a map. So this idea of building stuff on the map just seemed like it made sense, especially thematically. The general story is that these 3 factions sort of arrive on this planet, and they're trying to assert, it's deeper than this, but, in some senses trying to assert dominance over the planet for their faction. And so this idea of expansion was really kind of key here. And part of that was like, well, let's make it so you can build buildings on the map, because you're literally laying down a base thematically and then mechanically. And then after we did that, it was like, okay, well, also we want to make it so that when you're building stuff in the game, it shouldn't just be that you can just build something, especially at the scale the game takes place at. If you have this like really tight, immediate cycle for building stuff, kind of like Advance Wars, it sort of undercuts a lot of this idea of like time passing and things taking time. So we were looking at like supply line systems and saying like, well, what if you have to like almost like Factorio-esque kind of fund your buildings to be able to build stuff. And so in the video now, you can kind of see what's happening. So the general idea in Cantata is that in any given campaign match, you can see in the top left, the little globe blue icon, you have access to some number of basically fixed global supply, as we call it. Mm-hmm. And that starts through your base node, which in this is called just the machine base, which was just selected in the video on the far left side of the screen. And that is able to essentially produce some number of like a given supply type. So the machine base is able to use that global supply and convert it into right now is just called component supply. And so one of these buildings has some requirement where it says, okay, well, I need 10 component supply to be able to build like a basic drone unit. So what that means is that you now have to build a building on the map and connect the supply line, and then you could fund it to build a unit. And then, you know, you can see on the video too, the orange building needs processors and steel, which is the green and sort of like the little steel symbol going into it. And that's because that building is going to build a stronger unit, which has more complex requirements. So the idea is that you're sort of taking this global resource that's sort of abstract and then actually, you know, putting how it moves through buildings on the map, which does a few things. One is that another way to think about it is that it essentially just takes the idea of a tech tree and just puts it on the map. You're like, okay, this thing produces supply X, it turns into supply Y, which can then turn into supply Z, and Z is required to build, you know, the big gun or something.
Right, because the tech tree typically is just like some spreadsheet somewhere. It's just some like list of, you know, like list of lists sort of. Yeah. And the cool thing too about Cantata is that because your tech tree is now physically manifested on the map, any specific point of the map or a thing you build is sort of subject to being attacked by an enemy. So, you know, you have to be sort of careful how far you're expanding out and where you're expanding because the buildings themselves are subject to being attacked. So you can't just sort of stretch out infinitely. You have to sort of be conscious of how much you want to expand, knowing that the further you expand, you expose yourself with more, you know, weak points in your supply chains, which sort of gets at how like actual World War II-esque wars work, thinking about supply chains and resources. But Cantata abstracts it enough so it's not like as, you know, crazy grognardy as a typical war game or even like Panzer General. Yeah. So we basically made supply be the sort of core thing. And once you can interact with it, it makes a little more sense. It's just like, oh, these things just have requirements. I give them these things and then they are able to build those things. But putting basically all of that sort of loop on the map just makes the whole game have what I think that a lot of grand strategy stuff loses in the translation process of going from a tactics game, which is just this feeling of actual tactility. You know, you're feeling like you're playing stuff, you're putting stuff on the map. It feels like things are actually happening. Whereas when I play something like Civ or like EU or CK3, it feels like I'm sort of orchestrating something that has like a layer between me and the way it exists. So that's a long answer to your question. No, it's great. I mean, it reminds me of like, StarCraft, you know, I always wanted the base building to feel like building something, and it just feels more like adding things rather than building something, right? Because building something is like you're putting pieces together and you're making something that's like more than just the sum of its parts. Whereas in StarCraft, it never felt that way. And like, I was actually, something earlier in today's conversation made me think about the Zerg creep and how I was always so disappointed that there was like so little you could do with that Zerg creep, because it felt like the creep sort of like suggested that it was like this organism, that this Zerg organism was like, you know, had all these weird attachments and like parts on it, and they would all sort of be this one living organism. But really, Zerg creep was just the Protoss, you know, like what do they call those? The pylons, but just look different. You know what I mean? So I really like this. I also think Civ 6. I think we talked about this on the podcast, how they added the district system is a little bit of a step in this direction too, in terms of putting things on the map. And that's like kind of been like a thing I've been like yelling about for a long time in these games, because what it does is it's like it ties everything more to the core mechanism of Cantata, like of the core basic gameplay of, it takes things out of these like secret hidden spreadsheets and puts them onto the map. You have all this space, why not use it? That's how I've always sort of felt. So that's pretty intriguing to me.
This looks like it's almost has a bit of a Zachtronics feel or a Factorio to the building component.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it's funny because when I first started this game, which was probably, truthfully, like probably 6 years ago, and then really in earnest, 2 or 3 years ago, I was sort of like the only Advanced Wars adjacent game that was around. Like Into the Breach wasn't out yet, War Group wasn't out yet. The sort of tactics renaissance that I feel like is sort of happening right now hadn't started. But over time, it's been funny how I've started defining Cantata in part by the things that have come out, and it still manages to stay differentiated. I think especially with the rise of like the automation genre, there's a lot of stuff in Cantata where you could there's a way to pitch it that's like, oh, it's sort of like Advanced Wars with like Factorio-esque building, which is like not false. Like that's pretty close to the thing. But when I started it, I wasn't thinking about Factorio because Factorio wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
So it's been fun to sort of see, like, I mean, even see Zachtronics work in this domain with like, Mobius Front last week. A lot of people are thinking and sort of reapproaching tactics, which I think a lot of people assumed the book was sort of closed on, and are reopening it to say, well, there's still stuff here.
To be
I
honest,
think it's
this is what I wanted Mobius Front to be like, because this
I'm glad you said that.
You know what I mean? Like Mobius Front is a little too much like straightforward tactic.
Yeah, it's like move and shoot, move and shoot.
Is the kind of, it has got that engineering, building, crafting kind of component integrated into the strategy. It looks great.
Well, I was going to mention too, Keith mentioned Ed Beach, mentioned Civ 6, and the designer of Civ 6 is Ed Beach, who is known as designing like board games like Here I Stand and Virgin Queen. And these are like really, really intense board games, but they sort of are predicated on this model of putting stuff on the map. And I think at the same time, when I was doing a lot of the core design work on Cantata, I was finding just way more in strategy board games around the time like Here I Stand and Virgin Queen were coming out, and looking at things like Roads and Boats and I mean now Root and stuff. Yeah, it's like there's so much stuff here that is like, oh, these things, or even like 18xx games a little bit. It's like there's things here that don't really work in the way that board games, like they work for board games, but there's a lot of sort of finickiness that needs to happen. And I think that a lot of what Cantata is doing is also looking at, I mean, a lot of my metaphors for Cantata also have to do with like being a strategy-ish board game more than it's like trying to be a trad tactics game. Like it's not, much love to people like Fate Tactics and all, and War Group and stuff, but Cantata's trying to do something that's slightly different and hope that people, like it in some sense.
Yeah, I'm very, very intrigued. Now there's two other major things I want to get to in terms of one in terms of Cantata, which is
Sure.
The other major thrust of this project is not necessarily having anything to do with your specific game design here, but is more of a sort of a like an app design thing, which is that you're designing this to be like with modability, like forefront
Yes.
of your mind and your design, which to me, like I was saying before, is like a completely alien thing. Like I first of all, just on a resources level, like I wouldn't have the resources to do it, but like I've never, not never, but like in many, many years, I have not been into doing mods or anything, because I'm always like, well, I just want to like make my own game. Why would I want to mod some other game? But it's like that thinking back, like, I got my start doing levels for Doom and Warcraft 2 and, all these, like mods are super important, I think, for the development of game developers. And so, yeah, I want to hear a little bit about why you're prioritizing modding so much for this, because, that I wouldn't necessarily have predicted that looking at this game and knowing that you're a small team.
Right.
But why are you prioritizing modding, and just talk a little bit about how you're prioritizing modding?
Yeah, I think the answer is like a little bit twofold. One is that I mean it actually ties, like it's so deeply nested in the game that it's in the title. So part of the reason the game is called Cantata is that I was sort of looking for a metaphor for what a battle could be that existed outside of like battle or space. Like there's a version of Cantata that could have been called like sci-fi shoot game or something. But I knew like from the start that I wanted the Cantata to be a little bit of a platform for this type of game. Like I knew that the systems were strong enough and unique enough that I didn't want to limit people by sort of what I consider what you see as like one permutation of the game. So I started thinking of like metaphors and this idea of like a battle as like a song or like a voice that's like singing, and having all these different variations of these voices that are singing is essentially what a cantata is in musical lingo. So it's there. And I think part of it is that like no one makes these types of games anymore. And like I would love like a turn-based grand strategy Star Wars game. I would love to play a game that's like Cantata but themed as Star Wars or themed as World War II or themed as like weirder stuff like, you know, Kill 6 Billion Demons or like Dune or something. And giving people a lot of the tools just from the start to say like, hey, like if you want to play this kind of weird strategy tactics thing, Cantata can be a platform for that. And sort of in the same way that if you ask people, you know, what's the best Game of Thrones game, people will say it's the Game of Thrones mods for CK2. And I sort of have a similar goal where it's like, I want the best Star Wars 4X game to potentially be the Cantata mod, or the best turn-based Lord of the Rings game, or like even like World War II, right? I want that to exist in Cantata. And so I've done a lot of work basically since day one of architecting the game such that it's super, super easy to not only bring in your own custom terrains and units, but also that the scenario editor for the game is built into the game itself, which is very inspired by like what people like Ensemble used to do with the like Age of Mythology and Age of Empires modding tools, as well as how Blizzard's done stuff with StarCraft in the past. So I think just that lineage to me was really important. I care also a lot generally about like player creativity. The past company that I founded, co-founded with Scatter, and it was very focused on sort of empowering artists. And so I wanted to continue that philosophy here. And then the other part of it is that like indie game development is hard. And I'm trying to do as many things that I can that are possible for Cantata to like make it stand out, give it a longer tail than just a single release. And I know that modding is a good path to that.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds good to me. There was one other thing now, Cantata aside. I don't know, Frank, if you have any comments or thoughts about Cantata.
I wanted to ask, are the resources objects, or is that just an abstract representation? So when we see, those aren't things that can be attacked, those lines or the resources moving along the lines, or are they? That's
a great question, Frank. So right now it's right now it's sort of, well, I'm going to answer what it is now and what it's probably going to be. Right now, resources are abstract and the lines themselves are abstracted. So we actually had an older version of the game where the lines themselves existed on the map, but the issue there was that it provides too many points of failure for a supply line. And so it's incredibly easy to screw up anybody. When you reduce like, you know, even just like a Manhattan distance between two units, that's 5 tiles. That means that you've got, you know, 5 points of failure versus just 2 if the line's abstracted. So that the lines are abstract, those will stay abstract. The resources are also abstract. So when you give something, when you connect a supply line to something, you're actually giving that the potential to use it. And you can level up that potential, but it only gets used when you actually build something. In the future, things have happened in the game's architecture, and I think it will just make for more compelling gameplay. The idea is to actually have a resource as a thing that a unit actually holds, way more similar to Factorio, and then the line, still abstracted, transfers that to a unit, and then it basically pools its own resources. And that also opens up gameplay affordances where you can potentially ferry resources yourself with other units, If you destroy a unit that's been pooling a lot of stuff, you then lose those resources, so you're more incentivized to, protect things where resources are at. And I think it also, like, trying to describe to someone, like, the system makes sense if you kind of look at it and don't think about it too much. But once you really think about it, trying to describe to someone the notion of, like, giving the potential to use supply just doesn't make as much sense as, like, oh, you've got 5 supply in your storage, you click this button and 5 goes away. And it just really simplifies it, makes it, a little more knowable.
Cool. Makes sense.
Very cool. So question from the Twitch chat is, does Cantata have more of a single player or multiplayer emphasis? Does it have multiplayer at all? I forget.
It does. So I would say the emphasis is right now is largely single player focused. There's one sort of large campaign map per CO, of which there are 9. So the whole game itself will probably take like 20 to 30 hours to complete. And then the multiplayer, there's a lot of things because of the sort of modding stuff in the game. There's a very clear path to develop a more skirmish-based game variant where you basically start and it sort of generates a version of the world for you. But that's sort of like an offshoot that's only helped by the work we're doing on single player. But we know we want to do, and to be clear, multiplayer stuff does work right now. It's all peer-to-peer. Luckily, one thing about turn-based games is that the multiplayer is pretty easy to program. So that stuff's just sort of in and generally working. So there will be a multiplayer component, but the main focus of the development is definitely focused around single player. And then but all the modding stuff is obviously focused around multiplayer. So the idea will be that, you share your cool map and you and your friends can play it together, or you can share it to the internet and then, anyone can play with your like World War II unit set that you created.
Very cool. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to really talk to you about was this whole working guide to understanding when and if you should ever pitch your game.
Yes.
I've been spreading this around because I find it really useful, although I don't know that mainly it's the main use for it for me personally is that it verifies for me in sort of a way that sounds mathematical and sort of, quantifiable, something that I've had the sense of for a while, which is that I shouldn't get a publisher for my game.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what your chart is saying, especially once you get to the later part here, right? I mean, for 2D Tactics is in the zone of dismay. And you yourself are in this zone of dismay, right?
I am.
So talk to us about this chart. Tell us, you have a great Twitter thread here. But I do show this to a lot of people and they're kind of confused. I'm like, I'll explain it to you here. And then I start to explain to them. I'm like, oh wait, I don't fully understand this either. But because there's a lot going on in this chart,
there's a lot going on.
Yeah. So do you want to just like kind of give us a rough, the spiel a little bit and how you came to these conclusions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the high level impetus, I actually I'll send you a picture of the paper draft. I drew it out like months ago and I was like, people were talking about publishers again. And I was like, it's time to do it. So I pulled up a Figma doc and started sketching in this crazy doc.
Yeah, send me that. No More Birds says though, don't you have a publisher though, even though you're in the zone of dismay?
Yeah, so we can talk about that. So, so the first thing is that like, I pitched probably 30 to 40 publishers on Cantata. So people have asked where the data for this comes from, and it's basically from my direct experience pitching a 2D Tactics game, but also having pitched this game around for, 2 years or so before anything really started moving. Talking to a lot of other people, both in my space and doing other stuff about their experiences with publishers. And one thing that's really happened that I found is like almost, I would say, unilateral constant, and publishers don't try to hide this, is that when you ask a publisher when you should pitch their game, they never have an answer. Or the answer is always when you think it's ready. And part of the discussion, I guess yesterday when the thread went live, was this sort of like, much love to publishers. I'd never really met one that was any mean or had any sort of, malicious intent. But I think that a lot of them don't really realize what they're saying in these moments. So the issue that the thread that I can't remember who did this thread before that was sort of inspiring this was basically talking about how like when a publisher passes on your game preliminarily and says like, oh, send us another build in like 4 months. That first blush, you're like, okay, cool. I'll touch back in 4 months once I've worked on the game more. But in reality, the publisher is asking you to do 4 more months of uncompensated work such that they can then bank on it and not necessarily have to pay you for that work across those 4 months. Maybe your budget is, maybe you change it such that you do account for that work that you did in that process. But realistically, Cantata has taken me 4 to 5-ish years to really kind of get to the state where I feel like I can finish it relatively soon. And the budget I was pitching does not include those like 4 or 5 years of work.
Right.
I had people I talked to 2 years ago say like, hey, hit me up again. And there's no way I could pitch them a budget that accounted for the work I did to get to the pitching point, as well as the work between when they said that when they passed and then maybe they said yes. So it's not out of like a point of maliciousness. I think it's just the fact that there's sort of this unsaid thing that's happened traditionally in a lot of these areas that I thought was like, no, there is an answer here. There's an answer on when you should publish or when you should pitch your game, especially, and this graph mostly focuses on being sort of a newer studio or someone smaller. And I was like, well, what does that actually look like? And so I started sketching out sort of intuitively like what I perceived and kind of landed on this axis of cost and complexity. And then started seeing a lot of really interesting patterns sort of emerge from where things are at on this graph. And so I'll briefly explain it, and then I'll let you and Frank ask another question or two. But the general idea is that, so in the little black labels are genres of games. And then from the left to the right, you're sort of increasing in complexity. And from the bottom to the top, you're increasing in cost. So the most complex, expensive game to make, I have on this chart as like an MMORPG or roughly a 3D RTS game. And then the cheapest game to make that's very cheap and has low complexity is something like a puzzle game. Obviously, there's stuff that can subvert this. I think obviously of like Increpare or something, or, Michael Bro doing puzzle games that are more complex. But I would say when people think of puzzles, they don't necessarily, unless you're Frank Lantz, don't think of Michael Bro as, the person that's making puzzle games. So the idea was to say like, okay, well, across these genres, surely there's like some, function that you can say about where you should pitch these things. And what I kind of came up with is this like, this bell curve, this pink line, which I call, this is when you should pitch your game. And the idea is that if you look at any given genre and you essentially translate it down to the pink line or up to the pink line, just vertically, that's roughly where on this where on the pink line that game genre falls. And then if you draw a line from the top of the graph, which is the orange line, down to where that genre intersects that pink line, that represents the amount of work that you've done by the time that you've pitched that genre. And then the green chunk is how much is your budget you're asking for. So roughly, it's basically the way to kind of look at it is to say like the closer games are to that sort of middle bump, the less amount of work that you need to do in order to pitch something that actually feels complete that a publisher would potentially back. So I'll use the edge cases extremely real fast to sort of explain this. It might make a little more sense. So on the far left, you have a puzzle game. That is like all the way down from the top, the percent work to be done, because the idea of a puzzle game, if you're pitching it, is that you're like, okay, you're pitching this puzzle game. The budget is already relatively small. If you look at the axis on the left, you're already doing most of the work. So what you're actually asking for is probably not a lot of money, and the game's almost already done. So that's why it falls in the zone of dismay. In the middle, you have 3D FPS, RTS, couch co-op games, and those are a lot closer to the top of the graph, in part because it's very easy to sketch out core mechanics for those types of games without needing to flesh out the whole game. I think the example I used in the thread was like, oh, if your pitch is that it's a first-person shooter where your gun shoots goo, it's pretty easy to quickly build up like a level in like a goo shooter to sort of demonstrate this thing. And then on the far right, you have stuff that is more systemically complex. So if you're going to pitch a publisher an MMORPG, like you've got to kind of finish the game. You're not really able to pitch someone on an MMO, especially if you're a new developer, where you haven't like already gotten really far with like the game working, because they're going to have questions like, well, does the networking work? How do you handle items? Are you doing monetization? How are you handling subscriptions? All that stuff's got to be sort of sketched out. So that's sort of the rough idea, and we can talk about the zones too. But generally, the thesis of the chart is that it really sucks to pitch games that are on the left and right side, because you have to do a lot of work that is uncompensated. And then in the middle is sort of the area, the middle is the area that's more of a sweet spot, which I think is also why you see more of these types of games represented on like places like Twitter, and like a lot of game jam stuff falls in this area, because it's really quick to sort of prototype these sorts of things. That was a longer answer than I was anticipating.
No,
but
yeah, that sounds good to me. Frank, do you have any thoughts or
Yeah, it helps.
questions?
No, I think I totally understand it now. I mean, it's a little, one of the things that's a little confusing is that that total cost is different for different games. What that represents, that y-axis is a percentage. So if that's the percentage of your total cost, that you need to, how much of that you need to spend before.
Right, not the total cost that the game costs to
That's
make.
what's confusing. Okay, but now once you understand that, then it makes it a lot more sense.
I think the issue is that it's sort of both. It's both like an MMORPG costs more than a 3D walking sim. So one way to potentially look at it, which is crazy, if you look at sort of the vertical height on the total cost axis, and then it's like multiply that somehow by the like overall time to create, you can actually get like a rough budget somehow. So like an MMR or like an adventure game costs less than doing like a full scale 2D tactics game or something. So the general cost trends upwards as you move to the right, where like the magnitude of cost is different. But I mean, if you look at it as percentages, it's relatively the same. And the key thing is more like where these genres fall on this line represents sort of how much work has to be done to get to the game to a state where a publisher might say, okay, this sounds good, or I like what I'm seeing.
Yep. Makes
So
sense.
my question is, so you despite being in the zone of dismay, you have found a publisher. But my question is, why'd you even want a publisher? Because it's not even super clear for me, as someone who's making a game not terribly dissimilar from what you're making. It's not super clear to me why I would want a publisher.
Right. I think so. I was very careful about, I mean, so I would consider myself to fall roughly on this line. Like if you were to project 2D tactics down to that pink line, about the amount of work that was done to get to a point where it could be pitched. I had the benefit of having a full-time job for the past 4 years. For the past 6 months since I left my job, I've been living off my wife's salary. She's a programmer, so we're doing all right. So there's that uncompensated work is still real. It's work that's done to make the game get to a certain state. And so I was very careful basically to work mostly on core system stuff so I could get to that position of something being pitchable. And what I was generally pitching was like, hey, most of the, and this is true, I'm not lying, most of the mechanics are in this game, but what I need is money to do all the content. So I need money to do all the design time. I need money to pay all the sprite artists or the one sprite artist to do all the sprite art. I need to pay the character artist. I need to pay the musician. I need to pay the sound effects guy. Like there's a reason that when you see screenshots of Cantata, it all looks like the same thing because it's the same. I'm using all the same assets.
Right.
I have no money to, I have enough money to live, but I can't just blow it all on asset stuff.
Yeah. It's
so
sort
a lot
of
of the
vertical
work that I'm
slicing
using
right now.
Yeah, so that's what this pitch is like, or that's what the graph is trying to get at, is like, all things held constant, it's your first game. To make a tactics game where I feel like you could really pitch it, you've got to do a lot of, groundwork before it feels like it can work out.
Right, that makes sense, yeah. Cool. Well, I need to take a little break before Raph comes on, so I want to give you an opportunity, just like give one last, round of where can people find out more about Cantata? How can people, support the game? What do you want people to do?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, obviously, I posted the link in the chat. Go wishlist Cantata on Steam. Tell all your friends. We have a forum and a Discord that you can see linked on the website that Keith's looking at. I think the biggest thing right now is just I don't know, be a champion of independent strategy games if you're someone who likes this stuff. We are in the zone of dismay. So a lot of people who do a lot of these things do a lot of work to make these things happen, and it doesn't necessarily pay off. So I try to, like, on my own Twitter, I try to boost independent strategy stuff that's coming out. Like Tenderfoot Tactics just came out, so shout out to Badru for doing all that work, and the rest of the Icewater Games people. Just like trying to be someone who lets people know that there are alternatives to things like Civ and Paradox games, that people are working on cool stuff. There's not a lot of us, but I think just generally being a champion for the space of independent strategy is probably one of the best things you can do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for hanging out. Frank,
Sure.
I know you got to go too.
Yep.
Thanks, Frank, for
Can I say one thing?
Sure,
I want to say one thing on stream real fast. Frank, I remember listening to a podcast with you a while ago where you were talking with like Zach Gage about trying to buy an amusement park to build a games thing. So I actually found recently, I was looking for a house in Sullivan County, and there's someone is selling a Western themed theme park ranch for 1.4 million or something, but it's like shooting galleries, everything. They're all there. And I'm
on it.
I'm just like, can we let loose the NYU games people to do this thing?
Let's go. It's going to be bowling, mini golf, shooting gallery. It sounds amazing. I
mean, it looks like it's turnkey. You know, if you can get people to go to here during the pandemic, your chances now. So
it's on. Let's go.
Nice.
All right, cool. Thanks for having me on, Keith.
Awesome. Of course. Anytime. Thanks, Frank. Thanks.
Bye, Kyle. Bye.
See you guys. Great to meet you, Frank.
Yeah. Bye, Keith.
All right.
Congratulations.
See you guys.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Peace. All right. That was Frank Lantz and Kyle Kuchtel. Pretty awesome. And next up we have Raph Koster. What? And Frank just sent me this. Raph Koster's Playable World Studio raised an additional $10 million in funding. Wow, look at that. So we're going to hear about this from Raph Koster. I'm going to take a quick 10-minute break before Raph comes on and try to sneak some food. But I'll be back. Thanks for watching, and I will see you very soon. Let me change this. Raph Koster. Okay, yeah, I'll be back in about 10 minutes, maybe even less. We'll see. See you soon.